seems to be unelectable. A formerly inconceivable axis of Vladimir Putin, Tayyip Erdogan, and European populists is in the process of shaping. In Austria, a far-right victory was avoided by a negligible margin. Maybe the Brexit referendum is only a portent of things to come. In short, we see the eclipse of the old liberal and globalist mainstream. To quote Zirakowski once more, quote, influence becomes the sole domain of the populists because only they can effect change and only through destruction, unquote. And of course, they are the winners, with Vladimir Putin as their unquestionable leader, even if an unwanted and of course informal one. I was and I am especially wary of nationalism, which is, in my opinion, second only to communism in its destructive potential. Nationalist sentiment was among the strongest forces behind the Soviet collapse. After '89, it frequently encountered no ideological competition. In Lithuania, as in many other Eastern and Central European countries, Hungary and Poland, for instance, this tendency was aggravated by an irredentist mentality, by remnants of anti-Semitism, by a tendency to exonerate fascist sympathizers as genuine freedom fighters, and so on. Growing economic inequality and frustrations resulting from neo-capitalism have only contributed to the dangers. I do not reject nationalism in its entirety. The struggle for ethnic identity, for the particular values of a national culture, may have a noble component. It can counter a tendency towards sterile unification and Gleichschaltung. In the final account, it can enrich our world. That said, nationalism only too easily degenerates into a supremacist worldview, xenophobia, and condone criminality. Democracy gives voice to nationalism, among other ideologies, but nationalism is hardly conducive to democracy. In Sarajevo, before the Yugoslav conflict, I saw the symbolic footprints of Gavrilo Princip, the young Serbian nationalist who assassinated the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1814 and thus triggered the century of wars. The footprints have been carefully preserved in the sidewalk, as Princip is still a hero for many. I once said that everyone in the 20th century was a loser. Franz Joseph, Wilhelm II, and Nicholas II. Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. Churchill, Roosevelt, and de Gaulle. And alas, even Gandhi and Sakharov. The only winner was Gavrilo Princip, since his mentality has survived. Indeed, it has resolutely endured. That might sound like a rhetorical flourish, but there are moments when I am afraid it regrettably seems to be the truth. Here in Eastern Europe, we succeeded in escaping the immense cage of the communist empire. But there are people and social forces that imprison us in the smaller, but not necessarily better cages of national egoism, self-isolation, and anachronistic views. The word right has a double meaning in many languages. It can signify correct, proper, just, but also conservative and reactionary, as in the phraseological construction right-wing. Incidentally, Lithuanian avoids this precarious linguistic ambiguity, which is present in Russian, Polish, Hungarian, also English, and so on. Nevertheless, our rightists, like their counterparts in other countries, claim to have a monopoly on the correct way of thinking. They often present patriotism as their exclusive domain. Part of the right wing's agenda is the belief that Europe destroys national identity and threatens a nation's survival. This idea goes against the grain of the entirety of Lithuanian history. A unique and fascinating country, isolated amidst its forests in the backyard of the continent, Lithuania has striven to join Europe since the 13th century. Interestingly enough, this quest is even reflected in our coat of arms. A knight on horseback looking westward, whose name Vitis literally means to quest after. Everything that is most valuable in Lithuanian culture has come from its European aspirations. We reached the culmination of our quest in 1991, and rejecting it would be disastrous. Perhaps we, the Europeans, can still play an important and positive role in international affairs if we pursue the goal to become the United States of Europe with a larger degree of integration than before. Yet in the present situation, it is quite difficult to predict when and how the will to improve the situation emerges. Let me finish on a personal note. Every man or woman is an amalgam of contradictory drives. In my case, opposite impulses correlate somewhat with different genres, literary genres. First of all, I think there is a perceptible difference of outlook between my poetry and my essays. As a poet, I tend towards pessimism. My world is dark, enigmatic, and quite possibly absurd. As an essayist, I'm rather optimistic, even if I attempt to be as sober and cautious as possible. In my essays, I tend to believe that the world, at least the socio-political world directly available to us, is intelligible, if only in part, and may be improved, if only to a degree. In my poetry, as probably every poet, I opt for individuality, for language and all the peculiarities that stem from that, including, of course, ethnic identity. In my essays, I opt for a global approach, for cosmopolitanism. That is a certain loosening and even erasing of ethnic and national boundaries. Well, I don't know how to reconcile these contradictory drives. But if there is hope in today's world, it lies in their harmony, however precarious it may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas, for being. Thank you so much. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Žygimantas Paviljonis, okay, a perspective offered by Infonet, so that we're getting back to something very practical, pragmatic, political, and something that I could describe as down to earth.